You are thinking of a friend you haven't spoken to in years. Seconds later, your phone vibrates with a message from them. Perhaps you encounter a specific, obscure word 3 times in a single afternoon. Most people call these moments luck. Some call them glitches in the math of daily life. But have you ever noticed how these events seem to cluster around specific decisions? There is a persistent rhythm to these alignments that logic fails to capture. It is as if the external world is momentarily mirroring a private thought. These sequences are not random interruptions of your day. They are the visible output of a deeper underlying structure. This changes the way we see the experience of chance. Beneath the surface of the mundane, a strange mechanic is at work, and it is responding directly to you. Most of us have experienced those rare windows of time where life seems to cooperate. You think of a solution, and the right person calls. You take a wrong turn and find exactly what you were looking for. In these moments, reality feels fluid, almost responsive. But just as quickly, the gear shifts. Doors that were open suddenly slam shut. Simple tasks become uphill battles, and that sense of effortless alignment vanishes. Why do these shifts happen so suddenly? We often dismiss the friction as bad luck and the flow as a happy accident. Yet if we look closer, we find that these phases are rarely random.
This pattern appears more often than we realize, suggesting that our daily experience is governed by a pulse we usually ignore. It is possible that we have been overlooking a fundamental signal in our own lives. Something unusual is happening beneath the surface of these events. Watch closely, because the mechanism behind this is far simpler than most people imagine. We often categorize our lives into good days and bad luck, as if we are merely passengers in a chaotic storm. But have you ever noticed how these moments of alignment tend to arrive in clusters? On some days, you find every green light. The person you need to call is already dialing your number, and every conversation feels like a missing puzzle piece falling into place. Then, without warning, the frequency shifts. You face inexplicable delays. Simple communications break down into misunderstandings. This is where the pattern becomes clear. The flow is not a random gift, and the friction is not a personal attack. They are repeating cycles that seem to track with our internal state. Many people overlook this consistency, assuming these waves are disconnected events. Yet the repetition suggests something deeper is at work. The same strange alignments appear in different years, with different people, and in unrelated situations. It is a persistent, underlying pulse that behaves less like a series of accidents and more like a calibrated response.
To understand these strange alignments, we must first reframe what we consider an internal feeling. We often think of excitement or curiosity as mere emotions, temporary reactions to the world around us. But this reveals something important about how reality actually works. These feelings are not just biological responses, they are sophisticated signals. Think of them as a form of biological radar. This is where the experience begins to make sense. The teaching suggests that the flow we noticed earlier is the result of following a specific internal frequency. When you feel a spark of genuine interest, you are not just having a thought, you are identifying a path of least resistance. In this framework, a coincidence is simply the physical evidence that you have aligned with a specific trajectory of events. It is the language reality uses to confirm you are on the right track. Many people overlook this because the signal feels so ordinary, yet the mechanism is simpler than we usually expect. The universe is not organized by distance or time, but by resonance. To understand how this mechanism operates, we must look at how we navigate through time. Think of reality not as a single solid path, but as a vast collection of television channels playing simultaneously. Every possible version of your life already exists as a distinct frequency. This is the hidden rule behind the experience. When you follow a spark of excitement, you are doing more than just feeling good. You are literally tuning your internal receiver to a specific station. Suddenly, the pattern makes sense. The coincidences you encounter are simply the content playing on that particular channel. This explains why the flow disappears the moment we ignore the signal. When you shift your internal state through doubt or resistance, you are effectively changing the channel.
You are no longer on the frequency where those specific alignments live. This mechanism has been operating in your life since the moment you were born, quietly guiding every mundane interaction. It is like a high-end navigation system that recalculates your route with every shift in your mood. When you align with your genuine interest, the obstacles don't necessarily disappear. You simply move to a version of reality where they aren't the primary feature. This is why the pattern behaves this way. You are not creating these events, you are simply choosing which ones to perceive. If the mechanism is so simple, why do we find it so difficult to maintain the frequency? This is the moment the inner voice begins to argue. We experience a spark of excitement, a genuine impulse to act, and almost immediately, a secondary wave of thought arrives to dismantle it. We call this secondary wave being realistic. This is where many of us lose the signal. We have been conditioned to believe that for something to be valuable, it must be difficult, and for a path to be secure, it must be predictable.
We often mistake this internal resistance for wisdom or responsibility. We interpret fear as logic and caution as intelligence. But when we prioritize these worries over the initial signal, the frequency shifts. The flow we felt earlier is replaced by a heavy, stagnant effort. How many times has caution silenced the signal of excitement in your life? We talk ourselves out of the very alignments we've been waiting for because we are more attached to the safety of the shore than the momentum of the current. If you've ever felt this signal and watched yourself ignore it, I'm curious to hear how that internal conversation sounded for you. This tension is not a sign of failure, but it is the primary reason the mechanism seems to stop working. Shifting your trajectory doesn't require a dramatic life overhaul. It begins with a simple 3-step navigation process. First, look at the options available to you in this exact moment. Choose the one that carries even a tiny bit more excitement or curiosity than the others. Second, act on that impulse to the best of your ability. This doesn't mean quitting your job. It might mean making a specific phone call or finally reading that book on your shelf. Third, and most importantly, release any expectation of what that action must produce. This is how the signal becomes action. When you act without forcing a specific result, you allow the mechanism to work without the interference of your old conditioning.
This is where the navigation begins. The formula works best when followed with light-hearted curiosity rather than heavy pressure. By choosing the path of most interest, you are staying on the frequency where coincidences are naturally generated. What small excitement have you been ignoring recently? If you enjoy exploring how consciousness and reality interact, consider subscribing for more explorations like this. This simple loop, act, observe, repeat, is how the shift in your experience actually starts. The change rarely starts with something dramatic. It usually begins in the quiet gaps of a Tuesday afternoon. Imagine you are working on a routine task when a sudden, small curiosity strikes. You feel a brief impulse to visit a local bookstore you haven't entered in years. Your mind might argue that you're too busy, but you decide to follow the signal anyway. While browsing a shelf that feels strangely familiar, you strike up a casual conversation with a stranger who mentions a resource you've been looking for months. This is often how the shift begins. A tiny action, taken without pressure, moves you into a frequency where the solution already exists. You may have already experienced similar moments without realizing their significance, dismissing them as lucky breaks or odd timing. But in this framework, that bookstore visit wasn't a detour, it was the bridge. How many times has a small decision changed the direction of your day? When you stop viewing these moments as accidents, you start seeing them as data points. The signal appears in ordinary situations, waiting for the action that turns a possibility into a physical experience. This suggests something remarkable about the nature of experience. We often view our lives as a single linear track, where the future is a blank space yet to be built. But if the mechanism of alignment is real, it implies a much more fluid architecture. It suggests that the version of your life where you have already achieved your goals or found your peace is not a distant possibility in time, it is a present frequency in space. This changes the way we understand the experience of choice. When we follow the signal of excitement, we aren't just making a better decision, we are shifting our perspective to a version of reality where those specific outcomes are already established. Suddenly, the pattern reveals a deeper meaning. You are not a passenger waiting for luck to strike. You are an observer choosing which frame of the film to illuminate. This realization may already be unfolding in your own life through the very coincidences you've been noticing. Could these signals be guiding us toward versions of ourselves we have not yet explored? We are beginning to see that reality is not a fixed wall, but a responsive mirror reflecting the frequency we choose to inhabit in every small, seemingly insignificant moment.
Perhaps the signal has been there all along, waiting beneath the noise of a busy mind. As you return to your day, you may begin to notice something new in the rhythm of your experiences. The coincidences you once ignored may start to look like milestones. The friction you once feared may begin to feel like a gentle course correction. Sometimes the shift begins simply by noticing. You are no longer just a spectator of chance. You are becoming an active participant in a much larger conversation. How often have these signals appeared quietly in your life, only to be dismissed? The pattern is already unfolding around you, and the next discovery is rarely more than one small, exciting decision away. If you're curious about the deeper mechanics behind these signals, the video appearing on screen dives further into that mystery. It is the next chapter in understanding how your internal world shapes the reality you see.